the things we thought were yours and mine. You've got to hold your ground. Hold your ground. Hold your ground. Hold your ground.
We have 130,000 members in Ontario who are going to bear the brunt of his recommendations. But it's not just the folks who deliver the services. It's all of the people of Ontario who rely on good public services who will be the real victims of Mr. Drummond's recommendations.
Cuts for psychiatric survivors cut deep to the very personhood, to where our personhoods are taken away from us. Our capacities are taken away from us. And we are, ultimately dehumanized. We're not seen as a group of people, right? Like for me, with my diagnosis of bipolar, between 1 in 7 and 1 in 15 commit suicide. If that was seen as any other group in society, that would be seen as a social epidemic. But the fact that I'm seen as having a mental illness, that's just seen like, well, then take your medication. 1 in 7.
I lost my mother to suicide in 2001 when she couldn't afford rent, being on ODSP, nor got adequate services. So I live these experiences, I don't just talk about them.
I've been a correctional officer since 1998, the past 5 years of which I've worked primarily in the special needs unit. The best way to describe the special needs unit at the Toronto jail is a house of cards. There's a total of 72 beds, but it's not uncommon to have inmates sleep on the floor on a mattress. Many requests have been made for the addition of another officer to this area with no commitment by the administration. Following some well-documented incidents involving inmate deaths, the ministry's response was to add more surveillance cameras. The greatest factor impacting on this situation is the lack of available space in mental health facilities in the community.
My peers that I work with who are going out to GBI and Vanier and Milton, the conditions out there, they're bringing in trailers to house women. They're probably 50 or 60 women over capacity, and we just don't have the workers to serve all of the women.
I'm an ODSP, I have an education, and because of the limited amount of funding that I get, it's actually limited my ability to apply to jobs. We in the disability movement know that keeping these jobs public is the best way to make Ontario accessible. And what I really want to push here today, regardless of what comes out of this commission, is that we continue to build linkages with each other. We both understand the importance of keeping these services public, and I think we need to continue to build that solidarity together.
By privatizing services, the Ontarians have less access and can hold their government less accountable because there's no mechanism by which they can vote or anything there in which they can make an appeal.
It's kind of a misconception in Canada, and especially in Ontario, because we have the Great Lakes, just right at our doorstep, that we will always have sort of access to clean and safe drinking water, when that's really not the case. And obviously, with what happened in Walkerton in 2000 is the most sort of glaring and devastating example of what happens when there are budget cuts to sort of the frontline workers. The people on the ground in the Ministry of the Environment, they care. They care really deeply about what's going on in our environment, what's going on with water in Ontario, and they see the issues at stake. They're stretched way too thin. They don't have the resources or the manpower to monitor like the thousands and thousands of cases where there's contamination of especially groundwater all throughout Southern Ontario, all throughout Northern Ontario, especially in Aboriginal communities. If there are more budget cuts, this is going to be the greatest thing that's hit, and we are going to feel the repercussions of it. There are going to be more Walkerton-style, crises that are going to kill Ontarians.
There was a pilot project in the north where basically instead of using private labs, they moved laboratory operations into hospitals. It increased efficiency in hospitals. It allowed hospitals to maintain services after hours. It allowed them to have trauma diagnosis in the hospital immediately available to emergency physicians. And it helped fund the whole operation and give greater level of expertise. It reduced costs, and it helped create process to save lives. The government is ending this, and Drummond will probably recommend privatization of services. I say this is a crime. What are we going to do to stop them? And when are we going out on the street to do it?
Since 2007 to 2009, there was a 17% increase in poverty in this province. if the rich hadn't have been given tax breaks that they've been given since 1980, we could have paid for all of the deficits in Canada at this point. That's just the tax breaks, that's not the wealth that they made on top of that. Einstein kind of put it right that we can't solve the problems using the same thinking that we use to create them. So perhaps Drummond is not the best one to be calling the shots on this.
Privatization costs more, delivers less. End of story.